The gates of Leeton High School were locked for the Easter weekend. No students, no staff. Yet only one car sat in the staff parking lot, a red Mazda that shouldn't have been there in the first place. By Monday morning, that same car was still in the exact spot. The driver of the vehicle, Stephanie Scott, a 26-year-old teacher, was due to get married 5 days later. Her fiancé was waiting for her at home. Her dress was ready, and her honeymoon tickets were printed. When she didn't return that evening, her family called the authorities. When police arrived, her car was still parked outside the gates, locked, untouched, as if she had simply stepped inside the school and vanished. How does a teacher vanish from a locked building in the middle of the day, and no one sees a thing? Within days, the quiet town of Leeton was overrun with police, divers, and forensic teams. A search that began as a routine welfare check would uncover a sequence of evidence too detailed to dismiss and too horrifying to imagine. Join us as we uncover the story of Stephanie Scott, a teacher, a fiancé, and a victim of a system that promised her safety, whose only mistake was trusting that promise. It was Easter Sunday, April 5, 2015, in the riverina town of Leeton, New South Wales. According to police records, 26-year-old Stephanie Scott drove to Leeton High School that morning to prepare lesson plans for the first week of term. It was her routine. She was days away from marrying her fiancé, Leeton Woolley, and planned to finish schoolwork in advance before the ceremony. Security logs later confirmed she entered the school shortly after 11 a.m. Investigators would note that the school was officially closed for the holiday. No other staff were supposed to be there that day. Access keys were issued only to cleaning contractors and senior teachers. At the time, that didn't seem unusual. In small-town schools, teachers often worked alone on weekends. But the following week revealed how exposed that practice really was. According to investigators, that Sunday unfolded without interruption. No witnesses reported vehicles entering the grounds after late morning. The last confirmed phone activity from Stephanie's device occurred around midday, a routine message to a colleague. After that, her phone went silent. Access logs showed no sign of departure, and no external motion sensors were triggered near the car park. The school remained quiet, locked from the outside, with no one aware that anything inside had changed. Detectives documented no signs of forced entry or struggle inside the classrooms. Papers were stacked neatly on her desk. Her laptop bag was gone. What stood out to investigators was what the surveillance system lacked. No working internal cameras. Only an external motion sensor covered the car park. By Monday morning, the absence was official. Staff and students arrived to find the school sealed with police tape. A search area was plotted across adjoining farmland. Neighbors described the town as silent, a word repeated in multiple interviews but left unexplained. As the inquiry widened, officers obtained entry records from cleaning contractors. One name repeated: Vincent Stanford, a 24-year-old temporary cleaner assigned to the school through an agency. He had been on duty 2 days earlier and held a master key. At that stage, his name was one of dozens. Investigators were still classifying the case as a disappearance, not a crime. What remained unexplained that night was simple: how a teacher could walk into a public building on a holiday and vanish within hours, with no witnesses, no camera footage, and no sign of departure. It was a gap between ordinary and catastrophic, and in that gap, a system built on trust had already failed. By nightfall, the gap between missing and in danger had narrowed. When police left Leeton High School that Sunday evening, they logged Stephanie Scott's disappearance as a welfare case. Her car was secured and her keys were missing. There was no confirmed evidence of foul play. According to early reports filed by investigators, her fiancé, Leeton Woolley, called repeatedly through the night. Each attempt went to voicemail. By morning, family members and colleagues began searching routes between the school and the couple's home. They checked local shops and the nearby showgrounds. Nothing showed. At 8:30 a.m. on April 6th, police formally declared her a missing person. Local news bulletins carried her photo before noon. Leeton High remained cordoned off, with forensic officers assigned to the staff block. Police divers were deployed to canals near Whitten Road later that afternoon. As noted in court documents, the search widened quickly. Detectives requested vehicle registration scans from highway cameras and gathered CCTV from surrounding businesses. None captured her leaving town. Her phone signal had gone silent the previous day, near the school precinct. By Tuesday, the New South Wales Homicide Squad joined the case. Detectives from Sydney arrived to assist local officers. The shift from local response to major crime oversight marked the first formal recognition that this was no longer a routine disappearance. Police statements released that week referenced unresolved gaps in the initial timeline, a term investigators often use when physical evidence fails to match a voluntary absence. According to ABC News coverage, officers questioned staff and contractors connected to the school. Among them was Vincent Stanford, a cleaner who worked part-time under contract. Detectives documented that he appeared calm during the first conversation, answering questions without hesitation. His background check came back clean. At the same time, volunteers from the State Emergency Service joined the expanding grid search across surrounding farmland. Each evening brought the same update: no trace found. Inside the Scott home, relatives described a silence that began to feel permanent. The wedding date remained on the calendar, 5 days away. Her dress and invitations sat untouched. By Wednesday morning, the investigation had exhausted the town's visible search radius. With no sightings, no digital activity, and no evidence of departure, investigators began to suspect that what happened to Stephanie had occurred inside Leeton itself, possibly within the school where she was last seen alive. That shift in focus changed the case classification entirely, from a disappearance to a probable crime. By the next morning, detectives reviewed staff access logs. The cleaner they'd already interviewed now stood out for another reason. His keycard data placed him inside the English block minutes after Stephanie arrived. That finding shifted him from witness to suspect. According to police filings later tendered in court, detectives retrieved full access records, key rosters, and contractor assignments. The data confirmed that his key was used on the same door at 11:10 a.m., within minutes of Stephanie's entry. Investigators also examined tower pings from mobile devices inside the school during that period. Both phones registered within the same small radius before hers went offline. Forensic officers secured the area and began processing surfaces in the English block. Technicians documented fingerprints, trace fibers, and partial shoe marks consistent with cleaning boots. Samples were logged for laboratory analysis. That evening, detectives requested a voluntary search of the cleaner's vehicle. According to court records, he consented without objection. Inside the boot, officers located biological material later confirmed as blood, prompting immediate escalation. The next step was clear: search warrant, seizure, and arrest. For Leeton investigators, the missing person inquiry had now become a homicide case. The case file now held a timeline measured in data points instead of sightings. A teacher's ordinary Sunday had been reduced to coordinates and timestamps, a trail of entries and pings that ended inside a locked school. Detectives didn't yet know what those numbers meant, only that they all stopped at the same place. By the morning of April 9, 2015, investigators had a suspect in custody, but not a body. Detectives from the New South Wales Homicide Squad shifted their focus from interrogation to terrain. According to police statements later tendered in court, search zones were drawn across rural stretches surrounding Leeton, prioritizing remote bushland and water channels north of town. State Emergency Service volunteers joined police dogs and aerial units in the sweep. The goal was simple: locate the missing teacher before weather or wildlife destroyed trace evidence. That afternoon, forensic analysts began processing the items seized from Vincent Stanford's home and vehicle. Investigators confirmed a small blood sample recovered from his car matched Stephanie Scott's DNA. With that result, the search turned from rescue to recovery. As documented in contemporaneous ABC News reporting, police used phone tower data and vehicle movement logs to triangulate possible disposal zones. The pattern formed a corridor stretching 60 kilometers east toward Kokopara National Park, a region of dense bush, gravel roads, and disused picnic areas. By Friday, April 10th, the search moved into that corridor. Officers from the dog squad located a burned area along a fire trail off Mount Barron Road. What they found there ended the 5-day search. According to official briefings, human remains consistent with a female were discovered near charred debris. The site was sealed and treated as a major crime scene. Forensic documentation recorded the discovery of partially burned clothing, a set of keys, and personal jewelry, later confirmed as belonging to Stephanie Scott. Fire residue analysis indicated the blaze had been intentionally lit within 24 hours of her disappearance. The recovery team worked overnight under portable lighting. Pathologists and evidence officers logged each item before dawn. Later that morning, police publicly confirmed that a body had been located, but withheld identification pending autopsy. Within hours, community grief overtook hope. Leeton residents gathered near the school fence, leaving flowers and yellow balloons, a gesture that would later become a regional symbol of remembrance. According to court records, Stanford provided no assistance in locating the body. Investigators determined the discovery site using his vehicle's GPS movements and forensic residues recovered from his home. The search phase closed officially that night. For detectives, the next phase was reconstructing how she had been taken, killed, and transported to that remote location. In a statement that week, the NSW police commissioner called the discovery a turning point, but also a reminder of what access and oversight failed to prevent. The investigation had moved from the fields back to the laboratory, where evidence would now speak for itself. By the time Stephanie Scott's remains were identified, investigators already had the suspect's home sealed for forensic processing. According to the NSW police brief later tendered in court, officers cataloged every electronic device, document, and tool recovered from Vincent Stanford's house and vehicle. The results would define the next phase of the case. Digital forensic analysts extracted hundreds of image and video files from his computer and mobile phone. Among them were photos showing a burned area consistent with the discovery site at Cocopara National Park. Metadata placed the images on the same dates as the homicide window, April 5th and 6th. Investigators confirmed that the coordinates embedded in those photos matched the exact GPS location where the body had been found. Laboratory testing also confirmed that blood samples collected from Stanford's car and work boots belonged to Stephanie Scott. According to court records, trace residues found in the trunk included fragments of burned fabric identical to her work attire. The lab findings established direct physical contact between them at the time of her disappearance. Searches of Stanford's internet history showed repeated visits to violent and sexually explicit content, alongside searches about disposal methods and fire behavior. Prosecutors later described those searches as consistent with intent and planning. Investigators also located restraints, gloves, and a serrated knife in his bedroom. Police determined that Stanford had used his school-issued master key to enter the premises after Stephanie arrived that Sunday morning. Investigators reconstructed the sequence through swipe logs, which recorded his access minutes after her entry. The forensic timeline placed her death inside the English block between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. The post-mortem findings confirmed cause of death as blunt force trauma and strangulation, consistent with the recovered weapon. The victim's body was then transported from the school in Stanford's vehicle, driven approximately 70 kilometers to the burn site. According to prosecution summaries, Stanford made no attempt to conceal the digital evidence. Detectives described his demeanor during interviews as detached and factual. He admitted to acting alone, but provided no explanation for motive, stating only that he felt the urge to do it. For investigators, that admission closed the evidentiary gap left after the body's recovery. They now had physical proof, digital correlation, and a direct confession, enough to finalize the charge of murder. What remained unanswered was not how the crime occurred, but why an individual with documented violent ideation had been placed inside a public school with unrestricted access. The focus was now shifting from forensics to accountability, a legal process that would test the boundary between justice served and justice delayed. By the time laboratory results confirmed every forensic link, the case against Vincent Stanford was no longer investigative. It was prosecutorial. On April 8, 2015, detectives formally arrested him at his home in Leeton. According to the NSW police charge sheet, he was taken into custody without resistance and transported to Griffith Police Station for questioning. During interviews recorded that night, Stanford provided a direct account of the crime. He admitted to attacking Stephanie Scott inside the English block, describing the act in precise, emotionless terms. Investigators later noted that his statement aligned with the forensic evidence recovered from his vehicle and the burn site. He was charged that same night with murder and refused bail. 2 months later, on June 3, 2015, the charge list expanded to include aggravated SA. Prosecutors said the decision followed DNA analysis confirming additional evidence recovered from the victim's clothing. The case file was transferred to the Supreme Court of New South Wales. Detectives also began tracing communication between Stanford and his twin brother, Marcus Stanford, who lived in South Australia. According to court documents, Vincent had mailed a piece of Stephanie Scott's jewelry to his brother in the days following the murder. When police located Marcus in June, he surrendered the item, a ring, and was charged with accessory after the fact to murder. Both men were remanded in custody. Vincent remained at Silverwater Correctional Center under strict isolation, while Marcus awaited a separate hearing in Adelaide before extradition to New South Wales. At this point, the physical investigation had concluded, but the legal framework around accountability was still widening. Prosecutors sought full psychiatric assessment reports for Vincent, citing his long-standing violent fantasies documented during interviews. Those assessments would later form the foundation of the court's understanding of motive, or the lack of one. According to coverage by ABC News and the Sydney Morning Herald, the Leeton community's sense of justice was conflicted. The arrest brought relief, but the revelations about access control and contractor oversight reignited anger. The man now charged had passed routine background checks to work inside a public school. For the families and for Leeton, justice had arrived quickly, yet far too late to be called protection. With charges filed and psychiatric assessments underway, the case moved from police briefings to the Supreme Court of New South Wales. On July 20, 2016, according to court records, Vincent Stanford entered a guilty plea to both murder and aggravated SA. The plea meant police evidence, digital records, forensic results, and his own admissions would not be contested at trial. The court moved directly to the sentencing phase. In the formal submissions, prosecutors outlined the sequence reconstructed from forensic analysis and Stanford's statements. They described a planned attack inside the English block, followed by transport of the victim's body and an attempt to destroy evidence by fire. The Crown argued the conduct fell into the highest category of objective seriousness. Psychiatric reports submitted to the court noted a long history of violent fantasies and an absence of empathy. The assessments confirmed Stanford did not express remorse and did not offer motive beyond what he described as an urge. According to coverage from ABC News, clinicians also found no mental impairment that would reduce criminal responsibility. During proceedings, the court heard that Stanford had no prior convictions in Australia. Prosecutors highlighted that his employment screening process had not revealed concerning behavioral indicators, despite later evidence of an extensive online history involving violence. The Crown used that point to underscore the unpredictability documented in psychological evaluation notes. On October 13, 2016, Justice Robert Hume delivered sentence. He imposed life imprisonment for murder with no non-parole period, and an additional 15 years for aggravated SA. In his remarks, the judge classified the killing as a worst category offense under New South Wales law. The judgment referenced the brutality of the attack, the concealment effort, and the absence of remorse. Family members provided victim impact statements, describing the loss of a teacher, daughter, sister, and fiancé in the week she was preparing to marry. Outside court, police officials acknowledged the speed of the investigation, but emphasized the limits of background check systems used in public sector contracting at the time. Meanwhile, Marcus Stanford pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact for disposing of the victim's ring. He received a 15-month custodial sentence and was released in September 2016 after time served in remand. His case concluded separately, but the reference to the male jewelry remained part of the official summary of events. The legal phase closed with the maximum penalty available. Yet in Leeton and across New South Wales, the sentence did not erase the gap identified throughout the investigation, a system that responded decisively only after a crime had been committed. The next chapter would not deal with evidence or cross-examination, but with the consequences left behind. Vincent Stanford was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of parole, plus 15 years. But for a crime this deliberate and this violent, can any sentence ever be enough? Do you believe justice is defined by a verdict or by the reforms that follow it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Also tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation.